Arc 6, The Corridor of Memories. Chapter 89, Shaula. Ragged, ragged, scattering away. Crumbling, crumbling, flaking away. Tired, tired, fading away. Ragged, crumbling, and tired, everything in the distance was shimmering. Outside the tower, the witch beast master broke through the stampede of countless witch beasts by fighting with all her strength. On the second floor, Rita Stria, who had seized the body of Roy Alfred, was defeated. On the fourth floor, the blasphemer of fate, the vile sin archbishop of gluttony, was defeated. On the first floor, Emilia broke through the unknown trial by fighting bravely and heroically. A variety of obstacles they had faced while trying to capture the Pleiades watchtower had been cleared. This was the result of them trusting in each other, staying unified, and cooperating. To put it in an Emilia-like way, this was the result of everyone getting along. Thanks to this, they had finally managed to make it to this point. Therefore, the next step was: it won't mean a thing if we don't win this together. When they first arrived to the Pleiades watchtower, this was what Emilia had said. They had come here not to lose anything more, but to recover what had already been lost. Everyone had agreed with what she'd said back then, and that everyone returning from the Sea of Sand safe and sound was of absolute necessity. It would not be an issue even if more people returned than came. In addition to Subaru, Emilia, Beatrice, Ram, Meili, Anastasia equals Echidna, and Patrash, one extra Shaula wouldn't be a problem at all. It wouldn't even matter how loud and boisterous things would be on the way back because of her. Go! Of the two spirit knights standing side by side, the one who had made the first move was, of course, Julius. Julius brought back Qua, who was in the process of healing someone, temporarily halting their treatment, and once again clad himself in an aurora of light with the help of his 6 spirits. Due to the effect of Cor Leonis, Subaru understood that in order for the light of his OD to expand so much, both Julius and his spirits would have to be under a considerable load. It was a rather cool technique to pull off. However, no one here wanted to fight an extended battle in the first place. A short, decisive battle. Julius flew over the sand, leaving a trail of rainbow-colored light in his wake. Closing the distance in a single instant, Julius brought his sword closer to the Crimson Scorpion. Seeing his movements with its compound eyes, it swung its pincers and stinger with the fierceness of a storm. However, the moment his sword made contact with its shell, white smoke began to rise. It had caused it to melt. It wasn't even able to protect itself after receiving that blow, for Julius' strike had turned into a rainbow, his magic sword wrapping itself in a 6-fold light due to the constant use of Al-Clarista. Moreover, the light of the rainbow enveloping his entire body wasn't just for show, either. The ray of light, fired from the stinger at close range, had killed Subaru more than a dozen times, and had also been used as the weapon of death that led to the deaths of Emilia and Julius. It was also known as Hell Snipe. Julius did not deflect it with his sword, but rather by using the defensive capabilities of the Aurora of Light. The Aurora of Light, which enveloped his entire body, applied the concept of Al-Clauselia, which created a rainbow barrier. And so, a high-level swordsman who could unify both offense and defense was born, and could thus be called the Rainbow Spirit Knight. Its defenses were being broken through, it could not land a single lethal blow, and so, as a result, the Crimson Scorpion was having an awful time. However, the witch beast that had been the guardian of the watchtower for the past 400 years had a sense of dignity. Its crimson shell growing brighter and brighter, a great amount of heat was released from its powerful pincers and slammed into Julius, blowing the Rainbow Knight quite a ways away. Its pincers were extremely hot, distorting the atmosphere around itself due to the intensity of the heat. If Subaru were to give a name to the blazing hot pincers, he would call them the Jesus Scissors Hellfire form. It was quite admirable for it to show off its new techniques in order to try to liven up the last battle, but the reality was that he did not want it to show any growth. An enemy breaking out of their shell was extremely undesirable at the moment. Minya. It swung its crimson pincers through the air but was deflected by purple stakes from the side, preventing them from making contact with Julius. By himself, Subaru was not enough to do anything in the high-level battle between Julius and the Crimson Scorpion. As a result, Beatrice covered for Julius to the side while Subaru waited for an opportunity to do something. Subaru made sure to keep himself out of harm's way so he wouldn't be killed by the aftermath of the battle. He then pointed his gaze at the sea of sand that had been devastated by the whirlwind that drove the swarm of witch beasts from there. In terms of the damage inflicted and their sheer vigilance, the witch beasts that inhabited the Augria sand dunes had a major impact on Subaru and the others during their journey. However, what was truly unusual was that they were now staying away from the watchtower and looking at it from a distance. Emilia had probably rewritten the rules of the tower on the first floor, causing the clouds to disperse. Perhaps that had served as a measure to keep witch beasts away from the tower? Witch beasts did not seem to even approach the watchtower originally, so the fact that a stampede of witch beasts approached it was rather unnatural. Whatever the case may be, the fact the witch beasts didn't start popping up all over the place was a huge relief to Subaru and the others, who were attempting to get the Crimson Scorpion's Shaula's sanity back. Subaru. Ah. So that he could find an ideal position, Subaru cut across the sea of sand diagonally, but while doing so, he heard someone shout. Right as Subaru looked up to confirm what was going on, the Crimson Scorpion, which had been dodging the many sword thrusts of Julius, somehow landed right next to him. Subaru stopped in his tracks after hearing Beatrice's call, who was right next to him holding his hand. However, as if flicking away an insect, the witch beast's tail whipped towards them, and Subaru had a premonition of death in the face of it. Persevere. Morak. Subaru and Beatrice made their judgments simultaneously. The effect of gravity lessened, causing them to become as light as cotton candy. And Subaru's whip simultaneously wrapped around the base of the Crimson Scorpion's tail. In the next second, Subaru and Beatrice were flung through the air due to the swinging of the tail. Wah dash. Paya. They hadn't been flung into the air, but shaken off. After feeling as if they were floating through the air, they had immediately fallen to the ground and were now covered in sand. If there had been a hard surface beneath them, even though they were as light as cotton candy right now, their bodies would have shattered due to the sheer power and force. Luckily, they had only had their breath knocked out of them since it was on the sand. We gotta give up on chasing after it. The Crimson Scorpion continued to target Subaru and Beatrice, who were still buried in the sand. However, the light of the rainbow cut in between them, preventing it from making a move, and the heat and sixfold light clashed with each other. Every time the light was scattered, a sea of destruction was left in its wake, and the shockwave it caused kicked up a sandstorm under the clear sky. The destructive power of each was equal. Julius had speed on his side, but the Crimson Scorpion was rather resilient. Asterisk spit asterisk spit. Shit, something needs to be done. Asterisk spit asterisk spit. Figure out a way to win then, I suppose. Together, Subaru and Beatrice got themselves out of the sand and spat the grains of sand in their mouths out at the same time. With tears in their eyes, they tried to figure out how to get the sound of Subaru's voice as well as Julius' rainbow light to reach Shaula. There were three possibilities they could rely on. The first was for Julius to suddenly awaken to an even greater power and defeat the Crimson Scorpion in a single blow. This one was a bit unpleasant, but would be a win nonetheless. The second was for Subaru and Beatrice to successfully complete their new spell and finish off the Crimson Scorpion, obtaining a win with their teamwork. The third was for Emilia to suddenly drop down from the sky with love and peace in tow, bringing about world peace with her cuteness. I was really hoping for the third one to happen first, but as has already been stated before, Subaru didn't believe that he was capable of successfully awakening, and it was unrealistic to expect Emilia to show up with the perfect timing. That being the case, the best they could hope for was Julius suddenly becoming stronger. He's already done that once, so I can't expect too much from him. Julius and the Crimson Scorpion continued to fight at a speed that Subaru's eyes could not follow. Pondering what to do next, Subaru stared at the devastation occurring right in front of him, the aftermath of which was capable of turning him to ash if he got too close. The only thing he could do in the end was to fight with all his cards. If that was the case, then the least he could do as the complete Subaru Natsuki was to exhaust every card in his arsenal. Think. His brain going at full throttle, going over that which was not simply a hopeless dream or observation, he found something with substance. As he was searching through his hand for something to use, Subaru realized something. He still had one last card he had yet to use. Biko. Did you think of something, I suppose? Beatrice responded to Subaru's call with eagerness, as if she had been waiting for it. Blessed to have such an understanding partner, Subaru clasped her hand with his once again and nodded vigorously with a yeah, Here, I'm gonna use all of the strength this journey gave me. Ragged, scattering away. Crumbling, flaking away. Tired, fading away. Ragged, crumbling, and tired, everything in the distance was shimmering. The fierce light of a rainbow flashed in front of her eyes, and, following her instincts, she swung her arms to get rid of it. Her two bright crimson pincers glowed, containing enough power to burn anything in existence regardless of whether or not the object was rock or steel, and could cut through them as easily as cutting through butter. Bullwood, I'm not really sure what butter even is either. Talking about things based off of second-hand knowledge, she continued to chase after that shimmering target. However, this place was a vast sea of sand without any obstacles, so there was no way for her to corner them. But whether this was a place where there was nowhere to run or where she had to fight from a distance, she had complete mastery in such things. After all, snipers are always alone, right? This was also something she had heard before. A sniper was a sharpshooter who needed to wait patiently before completely finishing off their prey. And so she also chose to wait. With the pride of a sniper in her heart, she continued to wait. Day after day, night after night, she gazed into the horizon, forever waiting, looking at those who attempted to come to the tower. There were rules there, rules that bound her to the tower. She was upset about that, but she also thought that if there were no rules at all, her forgetful self would have forgotten various things in no time. Whether it was the places they went together, the words they spoke to each other, the time they spent together, or the feelings and thoughts they shared, they would all be forgotten. That would be so terrible. Everything had moved on and left her behind. Because she had been asked to wait, she could wait for as long as they desired, but since she was waiting, she couldn't help but hope that the person she was waiting for would come back. As long as they came back, she could wait forever. Therefore, I was so happy that Master came back. Because, one by one, everyone disappeared. When he came back, she wasn't sure if she could believe the words he said. Did she wait because she believed in him, or did she continue to wait simply out of habit? She wasn't even able to answer this question. She had never even thought about it before. There was no reason to think about it either, for before it had disappeared, they made true on their promise. I'm so happy, Master. So, she hoped he would never leave. She thought it would be great if he could stay here forever. Because she was no longer alone and could graduate from being a sniper, she thought she should receive an appropriate reward for graduating. Master, I don't want to be left behind again. I also want to be loved. Everything had moved on and left her far behind. Therefore, this time, she wanted to follow him, no matter where or when. So, I hope you can come to love me, Master. The crimson scorpion twitched, the glow of its crimson shell growing ever brighter. It was possible that it was an increased reaction of its warning color, but in the eyes of Subaru, that didn't seem to be the case. It was as if that crimson hue came about due to Shaula crying. It was the expression of the true thoughts of the being named Shaula, who had locked her feelings away for the past 400 years and kept her promise to stay in the tower. Red was the color of fervor, of passion, of unrestrainable love. The crimson hue of the crimson scorpion must have been brought about by its strong desire to love and be loved by the person it loved. After all, everyone says that Scorpio women are extremely loving. Kicking up a lot of sand with his own 2 feet, Subaru shouted that out with a burst of enthusiasm and brought his hand up to fling his whip with his broad shoulders. He aimed at the one whose back to turn to him and was fighting and fooling around with Julius, the crimson scorpion. He used his whip to announce his presence, seeing that she was so busy, but the master she longed for was standing right there. Since she was making advances on another man, he had no choice but to say some nasty things to her. Seeing you go after another man like this really makes me sad and wounds my manly heart, you know. Subaru's way of speaking is disgusting as usual, in fact. Subaru unleashed his whip and landed a perfect hit, having been pushed onwards by Beatrice's harsh words from behind his head. It had been beautifully wrapped around the base of the crimson scorpion's tail. However, just this alone would still lead to what had happened not too long ago, where they had been buried into the sand. The crimson scorpion, perhaps because it did not think much of their game of tug-of-war, instead focused on the fight with Julius, completely ignoring Subaru and company altogether. Subaru and everyone else was weak. It would take advantage of that idea. El Vita. Gah! Beatrice chanted the magic spell, causing the effects of it to pour over Subaru's whole body, his legs sinking into the sand due to the sheer weight. In contrast to Morak, which mitigated the effects of gravity, Vita increased the effects of gravity. Subaru's weight class had been raised to the Yokozuna level of the Makuchi division of sumo wrestling, allowing him to compete with the tail of the Crimson Scorpion. Naturally, that alone would not be enough. It could enhance the effects of gravity, but only up to 220 or so pounds, 100 kilograms. That was nowhere near enough to compete with the monstrous strength of Shaula, who could easily pick up and carry a dragon carriage. Therefore, time for the climax. Do it! With both hands pulling hard on the whip and his feet firmly planted in the sand, Subaru let out a loud cry. In the next instant, Subaru's body, which was being pulled up by the brute strength of the Crimson Scorpion's tail, returned to the ground. The obvious reason as to why was because the strength of the Crimson Scorpion and Subaru and the others, was evenly matched. Now in front of Sabartu, still standing firmly in place, was the hungry Horse King, who had broken into their game of tug-of-war with its huge, strange-looking body. Moreover, it wasn't just the hungry Horse King that had joined this unprecedented game of tug-of-war. Courtesan bears, winged moles, and suspicious serpents all joined the battle. All of these witch beasts, who were supposed to be Subaru's enemies, were giving him a helping hand in this battle. The cause of this scene was none other than, "Really, you're such a slave driver." It was the voice of a girl enveloped in a weary and unhappy atmosphere. The owner of that voice was a young girl whose cheeks were devoid of blood and having trouble breathing. Meili. Tightening her lovely face, she let out a long, hard sigh. Then, yelling out a hurrah, and clapping loudly. "Okay. Come here, everyone. Watching from the side is a Wayasti." With a single clap, and, after a single beat, the sea of sand began to rumble. Continuously pouring into this area were witch beasts, whose footsteps and roars could be heard. This environment was well suited for witch beasts, and the one who had taken control of it was the witch beast master. No, she could no longer be called that. The massive phenomenon occurring wasn't caused by a mere witch beast master. Using the divine protection of magic manipulation, she guided and took control of the witch beasts of the Ogria sand dunes, so the title of witch beast master no longer suited her. It was as if the mother of witch beasts, who had left a trail of destruction in the Southern Empire, had returned. She once again made use of her skills to cause a stampede for this battle, turning it into an all-out war. Though Meili wore a painful expression on her face, she still managed to stay conscious and had recovered enough to participate in the final battle. Naturally, there was a little trick behind it. Subaru had, naturally, used Cor Leonis to distribute the damage Meili had taken to another. Sharing it had been the last card in his hand. Not with Emilia, not with Beatrice, and not with Ram, either. Nor was it shared with Julius, Echidna, Patrash, Meili, or the sleeping Rem. It was the one who had come with them to conquer the Ogria sand dunes, their last ally. "Sorry to get you involved, Gan. Give me a hand." The Earth Dragon Gan, who had been left on the 6th floor of the distant watchtower, was also within the range of Cor Leonis' influence, so, as a result, Subaru made the decision to share that burden with the Earth Dragon. The decision to do so was heartbreaking for Subaru, but what was even more heartbreaking for him was that Gan met the conditions of Cor Leonis for those who wished to share his burdens. This meant that, just like Beatrice and his other friends, Gan wanted to support Subaru's actions. He was grateful for the spirit of the theatrical version of Gan, transferring most of Meili's burdens to the Earth Dragon through himself. This was the trick that allowed Meili to get back in the game. It was also the main reason why the Crimson Scorpion lost in the competition of strength. And also, this will be the cause of your defeat, Shaula. Subaru had taken command of the battle, and even used the power of witch beasts and an earth dragon, and, as he spoke, the Crimson Scorpion lifted its legs up. The finest of knights did not let this opportunity go to waste. Unleashing a rainbow slash, Julius cut the tail of the Crimson Scorpion, who had been struggling against them in a battle of strength, clean off. The severed tail let off an explosion, much like it had earlier, spreading a mass of destruction throughout the area, but it was unable to get through the rainbow light. Its trump card having been blocked, it violently swung his large pincers down at Julius' back. However, its attack appeared to have been born from a feeling of agitation and impatience due to losing the battle of strength and having its tail cut off. As a result, it was not able to overpower the knight who had defeated the first sword saint and overcame his limits. Hiss. The slash drew an arc through the air, beautifully slicing through the vulnerable joint on the left pincer. Still trying to regain its balance after its left pincer got sliced off, it attempted to chop Julius in half with its remaining right pincer. Right as the pincer closed, threatening to bisect his slender body from the waist. Al Cranville. A moment before the pincer snapped shut, an aurora of light enveloped Julius' entire body in a single breath. As soon as he deactivated his rainbow armor, that aurora of light let off an explosion inside the pincer that was about to close, blowing it to shreds. Pushed by the shockwave of the explosion, the massive body of the Crimson Scorpion flew into the air. The witch beast flew through the air, spinning, before finally falling into the sand, its tail and arms lost and covered in injuries. The other witch beasts quickly swarmed around it and pinned down the 8-legged Crimson Scorpion. Still resisting its fate, it turned its large head, baring its sharp teeth. Taking the Crimson Scorpion's resilience into account, it would not be surprising for it to suddenly come up with a new move at this very moment, spurred on to achieve new growth due to its current predicament, however. This is the end, Shaula. Subaru stood right in front of the writhing, struggling, Crimson Scorpion so that its compound eyes could see him fully. With no weapons left and its legs pinned down, it was in a rather sad state. It would be easy to strike the final blow now, but that was not what he wanted. Subaru was not sure what the correct answer was despite being driven to this point. Meili. If I had not been here, I wonder what you and everyone else would have done, big brother. Having been called by name, Meili sighed and walked over to the Crimson Scorpion. She stood next to Subaru and snapped her fingers with a sigh. She then had its compound eyes focus on herself. Who are you? The crimson, scary Miss Scorpion? Or are you someone else, I wonder? Having been asked such a question, the compound eyes of the crimson scorpion gradually slowed down. Gazing at Meili, its compound eyes showed signs of wavering before turning its gaze to Subaru. Those aggressive, compound red eyes slowly changed color. Shaula. The crimson hue of its shell slowly began to fade away. Its eyes turned green once more, its shell went back to being black, and it slowly began to calm down, and finally. Shaula. At last. Ragged, scattering away. Crumbling, flaking away. Tired, fading away. Ragged, crumbling, and tired, everything in the distance was shimmering. Ragged, crumbling, and tired, everything shimmered in the distance. Even though she was left behind, even though her memories faded somewhat, they still shined so brightly. Because they were so precious to her, she desperately tried to preserve them. Master, do you still remember? You told me, I'll definitely return, so wait here for me, and then you disappeared. In a seated position, Shaula hugged her knees, inclined her head, and asked like so. Subaru shook his head at her, who seemed to be thinking about nostalgic memories of her past. I don't remember. And I've already told you I don't know, right? Don't keep making me repeat myself. It can't be helped then. After all, Master is so much better at forgetting things than me. Master and I really are similar. That creeps me out. No, I admit that we have a similar way of speaking, though. That said, it was only the fact that she was using words from Subaru's world that he unconsciously felt a sense of closeness with her. He was not as charming, cute, or spirited as she was. He wasn't willing to wait 400 years for someone who had abandoned him. After all, I'm an impatient guy who wants immediate results. Well, if I could at least be with the other person, I might be able to endure it. Master, you're no good like this. Ready? There's a saying for this: the key to love is patience. Aren't you confusing this with the key to fashion is patience? Isn't that like the slogan of a tribute woman rather than a devoted woman? It's all about realizing the love swirling around in the depths of my heart. You can even laugh at this sad, pathetic woman. That kind of smiling face is also very attractive. Nope, I'm not laughing at all. Look, I'm starting to tear up. Let me see. When Subaru pointed at his face and said that, Shaula got up and walked over to him. Shaula, who had jumped up enthusiastically, came close enough to where he could feel her breath, so he once again examined her face that had fine features from up close. Her shining eyes were large and long, and she had a finely shaped nose between them. She had long, slender eyelashes, and her skin was so soft and firm that it was hard to imagine that she had been living in the sea of sand for so long. Although hidden by her spirited and varied expressions, her body as a whole was rather beautiful instead of cute. Given the name of a star, she had been destined to wait in this place for the return of the one she loved. Ha! Master, are your eyes glistening, or are you crying a little? Your master is a piece of shit. I'm gonna punch him in the face if I ever get the chance. Then I'll have to witness it with super mixed feelings. What sort of horrible situation would it be if Master KO'd Master? Geez. Lips quivering, Subaru squeezed his eyes shut. His hot emotions rose, pushing past his eyelids and falling down his cheeks. Seeing those tears fall, Shaula gently whispered geez. While Subaru's eyes were closed, his cheek was suddenly attacked by a wet sensation. When he opened his eyes, he saw Shaula's face pulling away from his. Her fingertips on her lips, she mischievously smiled with her red tongue slightly sticking out. Master's body fluids are salty and sweet. Saying it like this. The way I say it doesn't change anything at all. I always express my feelings with my whole body and soul, you know? Master, I love you. I love you. She had often told him that. Once he understood the context, it was impossible for Subaru to say that it was a meaningless statement. Shaula said I love you as often as she could because her heart was overflowing with love. Always, the words she wanted to convey overflowed from within. For 400 years, she had been waiting, wanting to love him, wanting to be loved by him. I love you, Master. I won't tell you I love you. I know. Because Master is a bad guy, is thin-skinned, and shy, but this is what I like about you. I'm crazy about you. Only you. Time had left her, and the role she had been assigned had bound her like chains. When she had almost hurt to one she loved, she cried and begged for death. Instead of hurting him with her own hands, she would rather lose it all. What did he say to her, who was in tears? He said he would never allow her to continue to cry like that. I will not say that to you, I love you, words like that. It's okay. I'll keep saying the words Master won't say. Master will definitely want to say them to me sometime in the future. Sometime in the future, you say? That's a long time. 400 years of waiting, can you really do that? Is it? 400 years went by so quickly. Waiting for so long, she had once cried out in anguish at that fact. Having been left behind by the passage of time, her love holding her hostage, she cried out that she was lonely. Now she had no idea that a world had once existed where she had spilled her heart out. Therefore, concealed behind her spirited attitude, how much emotion had been swirling around in her own heart. Subaru had swore to never make her cry. And he wasn't going to break that vow even now. That's why he hoped she could cry out. He wished she would cry. But now that wasn't going to be enough. As long as she cried, bawled her eyes out, cried out, and howled, Subaru Natsuki, who wasn't her master or anything like that, would run with all his heart and soul to her side to stop her tears. And yet, a mere 400 years is almost like the day after tomorrow. The Crimson Scorpion was nowhere to be seen, and in its place was a beautiful girl, smiling. She was so beautiful that he could not help but become speechless. So ephemeral that it seemed as if she would collapse at the touch of his hand. Shaula's soft cheeks flushed red as she said, because with the look of a maiden in love. Continuing, the maiden in love said, because I also loved waiting for you. Hey, master. That's why, one day, again. Ragged, scattering away. Crumbling, flaking away. Tired, fading away. Ragged, crumbling, and tired, everything in the distance was shimmering. Ragged, crumbling, and tired, everything shimmered in the distance. Shaula. A part of her shell fell off, crumbling and flaking away, and turned into dust. It didn't stop there, but spread elsewhere, her whole body peeling off and turning into dust. The tail and pincers that had been cut off, the 8 legs being held down by the witch beasts, and the head that Subaru Natsuki held in his arms, everything. Did she fulfill her purpose, I wonder? While Subaru attempted to bring all of the pieces of her existence that had been diminishing together in his arms, Beatrice uttered that to him in a hushed voice. The adorable spirit was listlessly gazing at the witch beast powerlessly crumbling away. No, it was someone just like her who had given their life to the role that fate provided them. His brain refused to comprehend what Beatrice had just said. But he instinctively understood. This was not death. This was, after being entrusted as the star's keeper of the Pleiades watchtower, the inevitable end that she had met today. Then, if they had not come here, she might have been able to exist here for eternity. Forever, in this sand tower, waiting for a person who would never return. Subaru, you should be of the understanding that this assumption is insulting to her. And so, what you should do, is not live in regret. Sheathing his knight's sword back into its scabbard, the knight tidied up his appearance, which had been dirted by blood and sand, and spoke such words. It was a ruthless thing to say, but he was right nonetheless. At that, Subaru gritted his teeth and took a deep breath to hide his hatred for that correctness. Then he hugged the one who had been alone for so long tighter. She who had been left behind and spent such a long time in this place. Slowly, not being alone, she was being sent off by her one and only. Subaru, Beatrice, Julius, and Meili were all there. In the distance, people could be seen running here from the tower. They must have been their other companions. Everyone was gathering together for her who had been alone for so long. But, even if Master were here alone, that would be enough. The image of her saying such words, not being demanding at all, appeared in front of his eyes, which slowly began welling up with tears. The witch beast's fangs gently brushed the tears that were falling down Subaru's cheeks. The sharp fangs that seemed as if they could destroy anything, intimately, tenderly, and gently caressed Subaru, who was the most fragile of all. And then... ah! The arms that had been wrapped around her suddenly no longer felt her. Crumbling, the shell of the crimson scorpion that had lost its weight scattered into dust. As he watched the black particles scatter over the sea of sand, Subaru opened his mouth wide. Shaula. Yes, Master. Shaula. Did you call for me? Master. Shaula. Being loved so much by Master like this makes me feel so embarrassed. Closing his eyes, the sound of her voice responding to his call rang in his ears. And yet, now, she no longer existed anywhere. Ah. Subaru crouched down to the ground, scratching at the sea of sand in front of him. The sound of someone's voice reached his ears. He didn't know whose voice it was. He didn't have the time to confirm who it was, but simply looked up at where it came from and widened his eyes. Still covered in black particles, a mound of sand shook slightly, and something crawled out from it. It was rather small, about the size of a palm. The small creature with a crimson shell swung its two pincers in order to get through the sand and then expertly pulled its body from the sand with its tail. It skittered over to Subaru, who was on his knees, and brushed against his sandy hand. The mere act of brushing against him seemed to have been her leaving behind a trace of her charm. Ragged, ragged, scattering away. Crumbling, crumbling, flaking away. Tired, tired, fading away. Ragged, crumbling, and tired, everything in the distance was shimmering. Ragged, crumbling, and tired, everything shimmered in the distance. Everything shimmered, because you were there. A mere 400 years is almost like the day after tomorrow. Because I also loved waiting for you. Hey, master. That why, someday, again. I hope you'll meet me again someday. This time, is it my turn to wait for you? Instead of the woman doing the chasing, the woman is being chased. Master, this promise is very, very important. This time, please don't forget it. I love you, master. You're an idiot. His voice trembling, Subaru muttered that, as if saying he could never forget that. Then he picked up the being tickling the back of his hand and cupped it with both hands. As if it were a little embarrassed, the tiny scorpion trembled, accepting his action. Its shell was a bright shade of red, so vivid that it seemed like it could burn one's eyes, oh so red. That was something that not even the span of 400 years could fade, the color of love. Chapter 90, Hero. In complete silence, Subaru's shoulders trembled, the tiny scorpion that had emerged from beneath the dust in his hands. He'd wanted to save her. He'd wanted to take her out of this lonely sand tower. He'd promised to help her, but now he couldn't keep his promise. Subaru Natsuki always made promises he couldn't keep. Not a single soul could utter a word to Subaru, squatting in the sand in silence. Beatrice, who was beside him, and Julius and Meili, who were behind him, could not find the right words to say. The scorpion, which had been in his cupped hands, crawled up Subaru's arm and perched itself on his shoulder, brushing against his neck as if it were trying to comfort him, who had even forgotten to shed tears and weep. Subaru didn't have a clue as to what the tiny scorpion even was. What did this scorpion, which had emerged from the remains of the crimson scorpion, have to do with Shaula? Or was she this scorpion? That's impossible. Subaru had exchanged words with Shaula in her last moments. However, it was not clear whether the conversation actually happened or if he was just imagining it all as she was passing away. However, Subaru harbored a sad conviction that it was indeed the case. Shaula was gone. Her existence was tied to the very rules of the Pleiades watchtower, and, ultimately, much like Reed or the monolith of the third floor, was like a stage prop for a trial. As a result, once the watchtower had fulfilled its role, she had to leave. She had followed the role of a stage prop until the very end, and for her to merely be a stage prop opened up a hole in Subaru's heart. That frank smile, the annoyance he felt because of her desire to interact with him, and her unfamiliar voice calling him master, master with deep affection, all of it was gone. If Shaula were to cry out and scream that she did not want to disappear, then Subaru would do everything in his power to stop it from happening, and would sacrifice himself time and time again in order to save her. However, that wasn't what she wanted. Smiling, she told him she wanted to meet him again someday, but then she disappeared shortly after. He wasn't sure, but... I know. I will meet you again someday. So... With a cheerful smile, she fulfilled her wish to tell him she loved him. For that reason. So... Goodbye for now, Shaula. Her dreams, which had turned into crimson dust, were stolen away by the sand wind along with her remains. Subaru let out a sigh as he watched. And, as if to brighten the mood, the scorpion, which had crawled up to his neck, was playing with his ears with its pincers. Ouch! Feeling a sharp pain, he felt as if he were being urged not to feel down about it. With tears in his eyes because of the pain, Subaru nodded with an I know, and grabbed the scorpion on his neck and tried to disengage it from his ears. However... Ouch! No, I got it already, so you can let me go now, OW. Hey, this is making my ear bleed, this guy. This guy's not letting go. What are you doing, big brother? Subaru's ear currently in its grasp, he panicked since he couldn't manage to peel the mini crimson scorpion away from it. When he was about to lose part of his ear, it was Meili who came to the rescue. Astounded by what was happening, she quickly moved over to where Subaru was and grabbed the mini crimson scorpion with her little hand. Just because it's small, it's still a witch beast, you know, so if you let it get close to your face, it could start chomping on your eyes or nose before you knew what hit you. Eyes and nose. But this little guy isn't like that. It's a witch beast, big brother. That isn't naked big sister anymore. Saying that, Meili plopped the mini crimson scorpion onto the top of her head. The little thing didn't do anything naughty to her head, unlike what it did to Subaru earlier. It appeared as if it were under the influence of her divine protection of magic manipulation, thus hiding its aggression. Needless to say, this was proof that the mini crimson scorpion was a witch beast that could be tamed by Meili, as well as proof that the little thing didn't contain Shaula's ego. Subaru, let me heal your wounds then, I suppose. Then, with his eyes still cast downward, Beatrice tugged on his sleeve and tenderly looked his body over. In consideration of her, he bit his lip and nodded strongly. He knew he couldn't stay in the sea of sand forever. Subaru. Everyone. In the distance, the big door to the watchtower swung open, and Emilia came rushing towards them. It was clear that she hadn't had an easy time due to how messed up her clothes looked. They would all be able to chat together, including about that as well. They had too many things to talk about as well as too many farewells to give. Shaula was someone who always worked really hard. After she heard the details and found out the reason why Shaula was no longer there, Emilia stared out into the sea of sand where her remains had scattered, mourning her loss in her own ladylike way. And then she gently patted the mini crimson scorpion on Meili's head with her white fingers. It was rather accepting of Emilia's fingers despite being ordered by Meili to behave well, and it seemed to find it quite pleasant even though she could not see a change in its facial expression. Lady Emilia, what went on the first floor? Were you able to safely complete the trial? After hearing about what happened to Shaula, Emilia looked at Subaru, whose face was sunken, with grief painted on her face. However, it was Julius who'd made the first move to change the subject. And after hearing his question, she answered him with an I think so. It was really hard because I didn't understand it, but I more or less completed it, I think. Oh. Do you completely remember me, Julius? That's right. I can certainly remember who you are now. Emilia asked that question nervously, and Julius replied with a look of surprise on his face. Whilst covering his mouth his hand, Julius said Lady Emilia once more, confirming that the Emilia who had previously gone missing had returned, and then nodded. Beatrice. Do you remember me? How about you, Meili? I remember you, so don't worry, I suppose. It was as if I had completely forgotten you until someone told me I'd forgotten you, in fact. It's such a scary feeling, I suppose. I also completely remember you. How about you, big sis? Do you remember me and all of the promises we made? Absolutely. I'll never forget them. That's a relief. I had a feeling everything would be okay since Ram and Patrash remembered me too. After hearing Beatrice's and Meili's answers, Emilia gave a sigh of relief. Subaru called out to their response with wait. And with everyone's attention drawn to himself, Subaru let out. That's super awesome news, but I want to properly make sense of it. In short, everyone can properly remember everything about Emilia Tan now? That means, Miss Ram has slain Libat and Katos. Subaru widened his eyes after Julius interrupted him and made that declaration. Libat and Katos, one of the 3 Sin Archbishops of Gluttony, as well one of Subaru and Ram's mortal enemies. He was also an enemy in this tower who had caused them much hardship with his extreme violence in addition to eating Emilia's name. After being told that he had been slain, Subaru's throat dried up. If Libat and Katos had been slain, that meant. Does that mean the things he stole will be given back? If that's true. If Emilia's name had returned, that means the other effects of Gluttony's authority will also come undone. Libat and Katos, who had pretended to be a gourmet, must have eaten beyond his fill. If everything that had been stolen had been returned, that would also affect the people in the Watergate City, Priestella. Thinking about such things, Subaru shook his head. He knew he shouldn't deceive himself like this. He knew he shouldn't bottle up his feeling and keep bullshitting himself. Subaru Natsuki, at this very moment, harbored an excessively selfish and egotistical hope. If Libat and Katos had been slain, and the influence of his authority had come undone, then. Ram, can anyone remember her? She was a girl who had been forgotten by the world, leaving a hole in Subaru's heart because of her absence. They had gone on this journey to take back what had been stolen, and for Subaru, the purpose of this journey was simply to save Ram. For the Watchtower, where they had gone to obtain wisdom for that purpose, to be attacked by Gluttony, was rather ironic, but it did not matter as long as they got what went there for. Subaru looked at everyone, fueled by such hopes. In response to his question, however, I'm really sorry, Subaru. But I still can't remember who Rem is. Why not? Betty can't either, I suppose. I still can't recall who Ram's sister is, in fact. Moreover, what? What else is there? Emilia had denied it, and Beatrice followed, leaving Subaru in a state of shock. His budding hopes had been shot down, so Subaru rushed over to Beatrice, who had yet to continue her words. Desperation in his eyes, she pointed towards Julius behind her with her white chin. I still can't remember Julius, in fact. Perhaps not all of the harm gluttony caused has been undone, I suppose. Julius. Emilia agreed with Beatrice's opinion with a nod of her head. Maylie, on the other hand, shrugged since she didn't even know Julius before his name was taken, and Emilia had no reason to lie either. It was clear that Rem and Julius' names had not been returned. As far as that is concerned, I have an idea as to why my name hasn't been returned. While Subaru was still in a state of confusion, it was none other than Julius who uttered that. And then, after looking back at Subaru with narrowed eyes, he continued. It was. The Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, Roy Alford, was captured alive. To be exact, he was the one who bereaved me of my name. I suppose that is why my name has yet to return. Passing through the grand entrance to the Pleiades watchtower was the dragon carriage that had brought Subaru and the others to the sand tower and left on the 5th floor. Next to it was a person waving at them. Long time no see, Emilia, Natsuki. Could that be Lady Anastasia? Widening his eyes, Subaru stared intently at the smiling, slowly waving figure. He confirmed that her movements, attitude, and even her expressions were all natural. Was that the artificial spirit, Echidna, who could reproduce a person's nature and act exactly like the original? No, it wasn't a reproduction. This was her original character. He couldn't really call it a reproduction now. That is to say. Anastasia. Did you wake up? Yep. It seems like I took a really long nap and made you guys worry. Echidna told me about the things that happened these past few months, too. Is Echidna alright, too? How can I put it? For now, other than the thought of blaming herself, there are no thoughts like, let me just die. As Anastasia answered Emilia's question, the scarf around her neck moved, and the white fox lowered her head as if in apology. Blaming yourself like that. I've already told you before. It was our choice, so there's no need for you to be depressed, Echidna. You think so too, don't ya, Julius? Me, yes. If I am speaking honestly, the decision you made me quite worried, so I am afraid I cannot give you an answer to that, Lady Anastasia. I feel a bit embarrassed, but I'd still like to ask, what do you mean by that? Hearing the reason why you shut yourself within yourself is, all I could ask for is your night. Unraveling his lips, Julius answered gracefully. Hearing his answer, Anastasia covered her mouth with her hand and said, forget it, I'm not going to force you to say it, with a smile. It was a very harmonious conversation. If you were to say that these two were like a master and a servant, then there would be none who could say otherwise. Did Anastasia really forget about Julius? Because they seemed to be getting along pretty well. I really did forget about the relationship we had before. This in itself, for me, is already making me totally angry and is unbearable. But she's been controlling her feelings, really, so she's acting like that. Fortunately, after being with Julius for the past 2 months, I can say a few things about him. It appears that I was born for this very purpose. You also seem to be going off in an odd direction, in fact. Beatrice spoke a bit gently to Anastasia, whose lips were quivering, and, by extension, Echidna, who was around her neck. Hearing that, Echidna snorted her fox nose and nodded with a yeah. Echidna, the artificial spirit without any history, and who had gone to the watchtower in the place of Anastasia, also had her own thoughts and appeared to have been able to come to a positive conclusion. It seemed as if Anastasia getting her own body back safely was part of it. The taking care of her many problems, as well as her regret she felt for shutting herself off in her own OD, and so on, had yet to be resolved. It'd be insensitive for us to poke around at their affairs, huh? The problems between Anastasia and Echidna should be discussed by them alone. Of course, if they asked for his assistance, Subaru would gladly exert himself for their sakes and assist them in solving their problems. It would be safe to say that the time they spent on this 2-month journey had fostered such a bond. Anastasia. I'm so happy that you got back safely and are super talkative, but I know. You want to know what happened to the Sin Archbishop that Julius defeated? He did this and that, and then chucked him into the dragon carriage. Julius did this and that. Anastasia shrugged her shoulders and then gestured at the dragon carriage behind her. Subaru silently gazed at the dragon carriage next to Amelia, who was pondering her words. Within it was Roy Alfred, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony. Before he entered the dragon carriage, he stroked the neck of the earth dragon Gan, who was attached to the carriage. With its thick legs, the earth dragon from the Agarus species played a crucial role in the final battle with Shaula, and had unexpectedly led Subaru and the others to victory. This wasn't the absolute best result. Nevertheless, it didn't undermine his consideration for Gan. Not to mention that Meili was able to survive thanks to Gan's spirit. I was totally saved thanks to you. In the future, no matter what happens, please continue to help me out. Gan, whose thick neck was being stroked, flared his nostrils, as if saying that would be a heavy burden to carry. Subaru smiled bitterly, put on a serious face, and then got on the dragon carriage. Then, after giving a nod to Amelia and the others, he peered inside. Inside was the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony. That's him. The atmosphere full of tension, Subaru peered into the dragon carriage, and after seeing what was inside, was shocked by what he saw. Alfred was indeed inside of the dragon carriage. However, the method in which he had been detained was a bit different from what Subaru had imagined. Roy Alfred, with his eyes rolled back revealing the whites of his eyes, was covered in a black crystalline material, effectively sealing him. It's a Sin Archbishop, so just preventing them from moving wouldn't be enough, right? That's why I rigorously solidified it to the best of my ability. This solidification thing, what's the principle behind it? The principle is that it is an application of Yin magic, I suppose. Using shamak to separate them from their consciousness, it is then solidified like that. It's a very ruthless way of doing it, in fact. So this black thing is like a chunk of shamak. After Subaru heard Beatrice's explanation, he was a bit shocked and then looked at the seal once more. Shamak was arguably Subaru's most trustworthy magic before he formed a contract with Beatrice, but its effects and the way Julius used it as a means of sealing someone could only be described as amazing. Seeing the way Subaru reacted, Julius said, "Please don't misunderstand me. It's nothing, it's not a technique I invented or anything. This exact technique is used to make the world's most famous seal. Though there is a huge difference in the scale. The most famous in the world. You mean that one? The Witch of Envy, right?" Amelia, who was looking at the sealed Alfred, said that. Julius gave a deep nod, confirming what she'd said. The seal used on Alfred had used the same technique that had sealed the Witch of Envy for the past 400 years nearby, east of the watchtower. In other words, the words of Julius, who had created the seal using a tried and true method, could be said to be more than reliable enough. But that wasn't the question that needed to be asked. The question is, why do you want to keep this guy alive? Subaru. Amelia, gazing at the sealed Alfred, said that to Subaru whilst lowering her eyebrows. His heart aching due to her gaze, Subaru turned his head and said, "That's just how it is, right? But when one of the gluttonies, when Baton Katos died, everyone remembered Amelia again. So, if this guy dies, then the rest of the memories would. There is no solid proof that they would come back. That is the biggest reason why I did not end his life. There is absolutely no doubt that Miss Ram slayed Baton Katos. However, was Lady Amelia's name returned merely because of that? Something else, perhaps he had given it back voluntarily, that possibility cannot be ruled out. If you make a hasty decision, everything could be lost. Julius threw out one sound argument after another, as if reprimanding Subaru for his impatience. And his argument was so sound that Subaru could not even offer up a rebuttal. However, in that case, what about his Book of the Dead? Subaru proposed using a method that only existed in the Watchtower as an alternative. When it came to revealing the true thoughts of a person, there was perhaps nothing more suitable than a Book of the Dead. Whatever the case may be, it was something that allowed one to experience another person's life. Even if you interrogate him, there's no guarantee that he will spill the beans. If that's the case, then it would be better to just use his Book of the Dead to reveal this guy's innermost thoughts. Subaru, I don't think that's a good idea. This kind of approach is. But, I'm sure it'll work. If we do it this way. You know what? Can I interrupt you for a sec? Amelia's opinion differed from Subaru's, who had suggested using his Book of the Dead. Not only that, but Subaru was just about to lay out his argument only for Anastasia to butt in with a raise of her hand. Anastasia looked at Subaru, who looked embarrassed, and folded her hands on top of her chest. I heard from Echidna that there may be things missing in M, like that Book of the Dead, so wouldn't it be dangerous to rely on it too much? Dangerous, why do you say so? In any case, that's something you vividly experienced yourself, right, Natsuki? I heard that you lost yourself while I was asleep. How many things could she possibly talk about with Echidna in such a short period of time? He wondered. Anastasia had hit him where it hurts. However, the danger the Book of the Dead held did not necessarily coincide with Subaru's amnesia. The disappearance of his memories did not come about due to the Book of the Dead. However, that did not completely negate the risk that Books of the Dead posed. In fact, when he read Meili's Book of the Dead, some parts of Subaru's mind and emotions were almost painted over by her personality. What would have become of Subaru, who did not consider himself to be particularly powerful or mentally strong, if he had been a more impressionable person? Who could say that a new Roy Alfred, who had inherited the soul of the former Roy Alfred, would not be born as a result? Then are you trying to say that it's right to let this guy live, Anastasia? Even after everything he's done up until now? If you're talking about what's right or wrong, then I don't think it's right to keep a Sin Archbishop alive. If I could just kill this guy and get Julia's memories back, I think that'd be good. But I have a pet theory about that. A pet theory. Whether someone should be alive or not, snatching and robbing him of it should only be done as a last resort. A person who can easily kill another human being will not have a good end. It ain't one of Hashin's sayings, but one of my own. Subaru's eyes widened after hearing Anastasia's words. In this fantasy world of swords and magic, there was such a rebellious, naive way of thinking. But at the same time, the moral side of Subaru felt like she was right. Subaru also believed that the less people died, the better. Not to mention his friends, it would even be better for his enemies to die less. However, that way of thinking was only limited to cases where the other person deserved mercy. He has caused so much misfortune for so many people, and has continued to torment everyone until this day. Do you still think we shouldn't kill a guy like that, Anastasia? When it's the right time to kill someone, kill them. When I need to make a decision, and the situation is critical, I will dirty my hands. But it ain't right to leave it to impulse. I think you're that kind of guy, not Suki. That kind of thing is. Because of that, you can shed tears for someone else who's been lost. Rather than a heartless Natsuki who doesn't shed blood nor tears, I would prefer to get along with that kind of you forever. Anastasia ran her fingers across her cheek and pointed out Subaru's tears. Instantly, Subaru lowered his gaze, the wound in his heart due to losing Shaula aching. Anastasia's statement had been mean. But it was, without a doubt, quite effective. Subaru, I also share the same opinion as Anastasia. Taking the sleeping Rem and Julius into account, I really want to hurry up and resolve things, but no need to worry about me, at least. Having gotten to this point, doing what is right is far more important than making hasty decisions. This also concerns my younger brother, after all. They were on the brink of recovering Joshua's memories, who had been left in Priestella, and Julius was extremely cautious, but, as has already been mentioned above, that was the correct choice. In order to make up for their pain and sense of loss, he was eager to get results. That was probably how Subaru felt right now. Let's summarize it then. Anna and Julius' opinion is that we should move Roy Alfred, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, to the royal capital to find a way to save the victims of his authority. He will not be pardoned after that, either. He shouldn't be able to escape capital punishment. There are limits to how much they can pardon on the grounds of age. That's how it may end up in the end. After seeing Subaru unclenching his fist, Echidna and Anastasia got the story in order. Emilia had no objections to the treatment of Alfred. He would be taken to the royal capital in a sealed state, so, in a sense, he would be in the same position as Sirius, who had been taken there not too long ago. Do ya also think this'll be alright, Emilia? Yeah. I also really want to properly remember the people who have been forgotten. When Anastasia asked her that to confirm her intentions, Emilia lifted her head and answered in a dignified manner. Subaru couldn't form a rebuttal to her words, feeling somewhat hopeful and bitter at the same time, and then turned away from the Sin Archbishop in the dragon carriage and suddenly fell to his knees. Ha! Subaru. Geez, I knew you were going too far, in fact. It's only natural for you to become like this when you've been in a bad mood for so long, I suppose. Subaru's head felt heavy, his vision was unclear, and she was supporting his shoulders whilst yelling angrily at him. Her adorable voice rang in his head and he realized he had consuming more energy than he thought. Wouldn't it be natural for her to say, it's a natural result? He had died many times when he had amnesia, died many times afterwards, came face to face with himself in order to recover his memories, fought against the 5 obstacles that plagued the tower when he woke up, used his authority to take on the burdens of his friends in battle, and lost Shaula at the end of it all. He had exhausted his mind and body well past their limits. He had only been there for a few days but felt like he had spent more than 5 years in the tower. Subaru, relax, everything is going to be alright. Can you be good now and rest for a little while? Let's talk about it when you wake up. I have a lot I want to say to you too. Subaru, who was exhausted and unable to move an inch, was being hugged from the front by Amelia. Her soft touch and sweet scent, which would normally cause his body to stiffen, were as effective as a powerful drug for him now, causing his consciousness to quickly descend into darkness. If I die now in the darkness, would I go back to an earlier point where I was running around the tower trying to find a way to save Shaula? He wondered. But that was impossible. He half understood it would be impossible, but he couldn't help but hope for it. Slowly, Subaru's consciousness was swallowed up by the darkness. Heave-ho! Lifting up Subaru's unconscious body, Amelia sighed. Subaru's eyes were shut tight and was breathing laborious breaths, testaments of how hard he worked to solve the problems in the watchtower. It showed just how desperate Subaru was to save Amelia and the others. When he rushed to her side when Baton Kato's took her name and was forgotten by everyone, she was so happy. She wanted to tell him that. She hoped Subaru would not blame himself too much. He was not responsible for what happened to Shaula. It was Amelia's and everyone else's responsibility, but to be more precise, I think her master, Flugel, was a really bad person. He was the one who pushed the achievements of the sage onto Shaula, and, binding her to the Pleiades watchtower, was responsible for putting her to sleep. Even if he was one of the 3 heroes who saved the world, since he made Subaru cry and Shaula sad, he was just a villain in Amelia's mind. Of course, since she would never have a chance to talk to him, there was no one who could relieve her of this feeling of frustration. He looks like he's really fatigued, but it ain't a big problem. He will recover if he rests. That's it, why don't we go to that green room? Yeah. Ram and the others are there too. Weren't you looking after Ram when she came to help me, Anastasia? That's an exaggerated story, right? Once I recovered myself, I just saw off Julius, who was going to help Natsuki, and Ram, who was going to help out Amelia. I'm afraid to say that Rem hasn't shown any changes at all. I see. Thinking of Rem, and Patrash waiting in the green room, Amelia wrinkled her finely shaped eyebrows. The slaying of Baton Kato's was, in a sense, done as revenge for Rem, who had been bereaved of her name and memories. However, the only thing that mattered was that she woke up, and since she had not done so, whether they managed to get their revenge or not was unimportant. That was at least something Ram would say without any sort of hesitation. The only thing that mattered to her was getting Rem back. I hope Roy Alfred can tell us something about that, too. There are too many unanswered questions about this watchtower, no, about the Great Library of Pleiades. An all-knowing Great Library, that is the claim Shaula had made, in fact. She was a carefree girl, but because of that, she did not play around with words, I suppose. She said this was the Great Library, so there's no reason to doubt that, in fact. Was the function of the Great Library merely the books of the dead? Or were there other functions? That is what they needed to find out. Based on that, Amelia had something to say to Beatrice and the others. Well, after taking Subaru to the green room to rest, there's a place I want to go with everyone. There is someone I'd like everyone to meet. Is it related to the first floor, I wonder? On the first floor, Amelia had broken through the last trial. This was something Beatrice and the others already knew about. The problem was that she had yet to reveal everything. Specifically, what was on the first floor? Who did she meet? What did Amelia do there? Since it was bizarre, out of this world, and difficult to express in words. It won't take long to tell you about it, but it's super complex, so how about we just meet them in person and talk about it? Said Amelia, pointing far above her at the top of the watchtower. Thou, who hath reached the top of the tower, step forth onto the first floor, almighty petitioner. After being guided by Amelia to the highest floor of the Pleiades watchtower, the first floor, everyone was overwhelmed and rendered speechless by the massive dragon's greeting. Seeing the look on everyone's faces, Amelia said, super surprising, right, and continued whilst craning her neck. When I got to the first floor and saw Volcanic awaiting here, I was really surprised. No, hold on a second, I suppose. Hey, this isn't a problem that can be solved simply by being surprised, in fact. In front of the divine dragon covered in azure scales, Beatrice let out a panicky voice unbefitting of her appearance. She was swinging her hands up and down as if she were completely restless. However, she was not the only one who was in a shocked state. This is... Whoa, something has appeared that not even I could have anticipated. What's going on here? Didn't you say that Mr. Divine Dragon was beyond the Great Waterfall? That should be the case. According to the prophecy from the Dragon History Stone, in the same year that the royal selection comes to an end, he will renew the covenant with the one who becomes the ruler of Labunica, Anna. Next to Julius, who had been rendered speechless, the calm Anastasia could barely hide her cold sweat. Around her neck, the sound of Echidna's voice was also slightly hoarse. However, after being late and reacting to the lady's response, Julius fixed his posture and said, "Excuse me. O great divine dragon who defends our kingdom. We deeply apologize for our rudeness in the presence of your esteemed self, great Volcanica, the bearer of the covenant who has kept it for so long and given us much aid. Although it is like this, it is such an honor to meet you. I am Julius Juculius, a member of the royal guard of the kingdom of Lugunica. I've made sure to keep many of your treasured tales in mind." Julius, who had kneeled down and bowed, removed his sword from his waist and placed it on the ground next to him as a form of the utmost respect. And so, as a knight who served the dragon kingdom, he showed the greatest courtesy to the divine dragon. Then, narrowing his golden eyes, Volcanica said, "I am Volcanica. In accordance with the ancient covenant, the will of thee who hath reached the top shall be questioned. My life, my faith, have all been dedicated to Lady Anastasia Hashan. The one who will be the next ruler, and forge the next covenant, will surely be Lady Anastasia, Kou. Julius, are you crying?" Julius, who was on his knees helplessly shedding tears, disturbed Anastasia. Wiping his tears away with the back of his hand, he said, "My apologies. Not only did I become acquainted with one of the three heroes Reed, but I was also able to meet the divine dragon, Volcanica. As a knight of the kingdom of Lugunica, I could not be any more honored. This tower, what in the world is it?" Julius' voice trembled due to experiencing something awe-inspiring. With a tinge of remorse, as if she were ruining his special moment, Emilia started to say about that. "Julius, I'm really hesitant to tell you this because you're so happy, but... My apologies, Lady Emilia. Disregarding you and Lady Anastasia, I attempted to talk with the divine dragon without permission. Don't worry about it. It's just that, Volcanica is..." Trying to explain things to Julius without hurting him, Emilia struggled to find the right words to say. Then, coming from above her head, "Thou, who hath reached the top of the tower. Step forth onto the first floor, almighty petitioner." Wait a second. This line, I feel like I just heard it earlier. Hearing him repeat those words, Anastasia was the first to become suspicious. However, that same feeling spread to the others, too. Saying that was a natural thing to do, and everyone immediately noticed the change in Volcanica, who continued to repeat the same words over and over again. Although that's Volcanica, he's been waiting here for so long that he became a bit senile. Since his body is still full of energy, he's a bit of a rowdy one though. Volcanica, who had a pretty bad case of dementia, still had the true power of a dragon, but over the course of a long period his mind became damaged. Perhaps because of the trial of the first floor, the divine dragon exerted a great amount of energy to stop Emilia from getting up the pillar, but once Emilia had reached the monolith, he judged that she had passed the trial and returned to his original position. Moreover, although the trial had ended, he still continued to talk about the trial. "The great divine dragon is senile. Julius, calm down. Come on, you're a little tired, aren't ya? Why don't you sit down?" Julius was extremely shocked by Emilia's words. After Reed, the second legend he encountered also differed from the stories he'd heard about them, causing his knees to tremble. Emilia also didn't want to disappoint Julius, whose eyes sparkled, and somehow felt a dull pain in her chest. "But... Emilia, that's probably not the case, I suppose. This isn't some kind of dementia, in fact." "Echidna, I'm sure you can feel it, too, I suppose. This isn't dementia." Yes. I wasn't sure at first, but I feel it now. This isn't the wearing down of the mind, but the emptiness of the spirit." Emptiness of the spirit. Emilia was puzzled by the mutually understandable conversation going on between the artificial spirits Echidna and Beatrice. With surprised expressions on the faces of Julius and Anastasia, Beatrice held out her finger and said, "It's simple, in fact. His spirit is empty. That is to say, his spirit is not within him, I suppose. As a result, he is limited in what he can say and respond with, in fact. Just think of it as him being 90% asleep, I suppose." 90%. But he was super strong, though? If his spirit were there, it would have been incomparable. Echidna's tone implied that she had been lucky to survive, making Emilia shudder in response. Emilia had just barely survived the desperate battle with the help of her ice soldiers. Surprisingly, that had just been akin to fighting with a half-asleep Volcanica. Although being half-asleep and being senile were similar, they were completely different in nature. But even if his spirit isn't there, he still has the body of the divine dragon, I suppose. If that's the case, then there may be a way to help the people of Pristella, in fact.
A way to help everyone? How can we do that? I see.
We can get the blood of a dragon from the divine dragon. Anastasia snapped her fingers, and Beatrice nodded at her words. Also hearing that, Emilia widened her eyes and let out an ah. The source of all of the tales that had been passed down in the kingdom of Lubunica was none other than the blood of the divine dragon, Volcanica. It had been said that a dragon's blood was a miracle elixir that could revive a barren land, ensure a bountiful harvest, and heal all illnesses and injuries. To put it simply, many remarkable effects of it had been recorded.
And, not to mention anything else, dragon's blood was an element that Emilia could not ignore. If I get the blood from Volcanica. The reason why Emilia was participating in the royal selection was to obtain the dragon's blood kept in the kingdom of Lubunica and use it to thaw the frozen soil of the great Elier forest.
Emilia was determined to participate in the royal selection in order to liberate her people, who had been frozen in that forest because of her power going wild. The realization that her main purpose in participating in it had a possibility of being achieved suddenly hit her.
It made Emilia tense up and hold her breath.
If Volcanica's blood could be obtained here, then Emilia would no longer have a reason to ascend the throne. Emilia, I'm sorry to have confused you, I suppose.
The blood that you are thinking about is not the same blood of this Volcanica, in fact.
That's why you won't be able to achieve that, I suppose,
said Beatrice to Emilia, who was about to lose her reason for participating in the royal selection.
Emilia then looked at her with rounded eyes and said, "Not.
What do you mean I won't be able to achieve that? I've studied really hard, you know. In order to melt the ice in the forest, I need the dragon's blood in the royal castle.
So, there's nothing wrong with that idea, I suppose. However, as I stated earlier, the blood in Ludunica's royal castle and the blood of this Volcanica are, strictly speaking, not the same. The dragon's blood in the royal castle is the blood that spilled from the last beat of a dying dragon's heart, I suppose."
The last drop of blood from the heart? Hearing things she had never heard before, Emilia frowned, scrunching up her finely shaped eyebrows.
Beatrice gently nodded, and then Julius raised his hand and said, "May I ask a question?" Julius, who seemed to have just barely recovered from the shock of hearing about the existence or non-existence of the divine dragon's spirit, looked up at the divine dragon, whose responses remained unchanged.
"Excuse me, Lady Beatrice, but what do you mean by what you just said? I am also a knight belonging to the royal guard of the kingdom of Lubunica.
My ears pick up many things regarding the kingdom.
However, the thing you just said."
As its heart beat one last time, the blood from its heart was poured into a container. That blood, as the true blood of a dragon, was entrusted to the royal castle in order to serve as proof of the covenant between man and dragon. It's no surprise that you do not know this, in fact. The words I said just now came from a book that had been sealed within the Forbidden Library. There is no longer any trace of its existence in the outside world, for it was an account left by the Witch of Greed, Echidna, I suppose. After hearing Beatrice's response, Julius gasped, his eyes widening. As a knight of the kingdom, he didn't even know about that, but if it came from Beatrice, he couldn't consider it a lie.
And if it was the truth, then, which dragon's blood is the dragon's blood being kept in the royal capital, Lubunica? The last beating of the heart would mean. It'd be strange if the dragon who left the blood didn't die.
In that case, it wouldn't make sense for it to have come from the empty-headed Mr. Divine Dragon.
Julius and Anastasia voiced their doubts, but they were also justified in doing so. If the dragon's blood came from the last beat of its heart, then it would not belong to Volcanica.
Also, if it was still the blood of a great power. Unfortunately, it wasn't mentioned in the book, in fact. That person is always doing things half-heartedly.
From what I can tell, that Witch of Greed is the biggest reason why Natsuki is so cold to me, right? Because of that, he doesn't have a good impression of me, and now that impression is only getting amplified. Don't speak ill of mother, I suppose. Mind your words, in fact. Don't fight like that, you two. But,
After scolding the two of them who were getting heated with each other because of having a difference of opinion regarding Echidna, Emilia silently lowered her head.
When Emilia first heard that Volcanica's blood was different from the dragon's blood in the royal castle, she was surprised. And yet, at the same time, she was relieved. Such a thing is so strange. Emilia's main goal was to help everyone in the forest. This goal remained unchanged even today. Therefore, if she were able to obtain Volcanica's blood here and use it as a solution, it would be possible to liberate everyone in the Great Elier Forest using it. However, while she wanted to do so, she was hesitant. If She used another means to melt the permafrost plaguing the Great Elier Forest. Would she step off the stage and stop participating in the royal selection? Emilia's concerns aside, if Beatrice's words are true, can anything be done with Mr. Volcanica's blood? There's a high possibility of it being a disappointment, right? Whether he's become useless, senile, or lost his spirit, he is still a divine dragon, I suppose. So his blood must be quite powerful as well. It's just that it wouldn't be enough to melt everyone's ice, right? In response to Emilia's question, Beatrice gave her an apologetic look and nodded her head. Gazing at the appearance of Beatrice, who looked more sad than herself, Emilia relaxed her lips, looked up, and said, "It's okay." That fact is pretty disappointing, but since it was something that happened so suddenly, I was so surprised that I didn't realize it. So, it's not a big deal. I'm sorry, I suppose. I should have told you about it, in fact. I didn't expect the divine dragon to be in a place like this, I suppose. It's truly regrettable. That's right, he's such a troublemaker. Beatrice's face sunk in a way that didn't suit her, and Emilia puffed up her chest. To be honest, she really did feel disappointed. However, what she had said to Beatrice was the truth. Rather, it felt as if she had been told she could not take shortcuts or cheat. Then, let's get back to the question at hand. If the blood of the divine dragon is used, there is a possibility of restoring those in Priestella who have had their appearances changed due to lust's authority. As Beatrice stated, even if he does not have a spirit, the blood itself should still contain great power. It has been said that a single drop of the castle's dragon's blood could revitalize a wasteland. It's a powerful medicine, ain't it? Therefore, it would be essential to dilute it thousands of times. But it's a pretty big improvement compared to having nothing at all. If the stories about it being a miracle medicine are true, then it's worth giving it a shot. After hearing the conversation going on between Echidna, Anastasia, and Julius, Emilia once again felt hopeful. They had crossed the Augria sand dunes in order to help those who had suffered misfortune. If they could find a way to solve the problems caused by lust and gluttony, that would be best. Otherwise, there would be no way to reward Subaru for all of the damage he had suffered. I'm so selfish like this. It was very selfish of her to want to make Shaula's sacrifice have meaning. She'd spent a long time in this tower following her own thoughts and desires. It had been Shaula herself who'd made it meaningful, not Emilia. I got it. I'll go and ask Volcanica about it. But he may not understand me at all and go on a rampage if I try to take his blood. Don't you ever get tired of hearing that, I suppose? Emilia, as the new administrator of the Pleiades Watchtower, you have authority over it now, in fact. Can you do something with it, I wonder? The administrator's authority, I still don't have any awareness of that, like at all. The mystery of the third floor had been solved. She had broken through Reed on the second floor, and expressed her will to Volcanica on the first floor. Based on these conditions alone, Emilia had indeed captured the watchtower. However, if she were to say whether or not she could see any obvious changes, the answer would be no. What she could vaguely perceive now was: the sand dunes leading to the watchtower will no longer reject anyone, I think. Is this the choice you made, Emilia? Isn't that kind of statement quite risky since books of the dead are troublesome things? We may face dangerous situations sometimes, but I think we can handle it if we are careful and use them properly. I think there are still lots of things that can't be decided on our own. For Emilia and the others, it would be too difficult to draw any conclusions about the tower since they were too few in number. For better or worse, she and the others didn't have the power to do anything about it. Therefore, it would be best to let more capable people figure it out. That's what I think. Do you not agree with it? I feel like you're putting a little too much hope in others, but this is the conclusion you came to. If Anna and Julius don't object to it, then neither will I. Thank you, Echidna. Emilia thanked Echidna, who had been the first to agree with her, like this. Anastasia also spoke up with a got it. I don't object to it either. Actually, even if we made an effort to hide it, it would be difficult to make the most of it. If that's the case, it'd be best to share what we found after trekking all the way here. There's the issue of gluttony, and we might be able to bring the dragon's blood back, too. We should not be vile, nor expect too much. The most important thing is that it was Lady Emilia who reached the top of the tower. We should respect her wishes. Anastasia, Julius, thank you. After receiving the two's agreement, Emilia thanked them with a smile. Then she finally looked back at Beatrice, who had yet to express her opinion on the matter. How about you, Beatrice? Do you think this is too irresponsible? If you are talking about being responsible or irresponsible, abandoning this place without investigating it is the most irresponsible thing we could do, I suppose. Betty does not object, in fact. I am also personally interested in this. Awesome.
Amelia placed her hand on her chest, relieved that one of her closest companions did not disagree with her.
Okay, next up is the issue of the blood. The easiest way to go about it is to take Volcanica with us. I think that'll cause a lot of problems. It was true that Volcanica was rather large, and if they took him back with them, there was a possibility that he would bump into a lot of things. However, since he could fly, he could just fly in the air when they entered a street and not have to worry about him bumping into anything. Volcanica. Can you come with us? Or, if you have to stay here, I'd like for you to share some of your blood with me. Volcanica? Half expecting something to happen, half giving up, thinking that Volcanica would only repeat the lines from the trial, Amelia frowned at his present reaction. Volcanica, the divine dragon, who had returned to his original position on the first floor and was leaning against the central pillar, slowly raised his head and turned his gaze outside of the tower. He neither responded to Amelia and the others, nor did he show any sort of aggression. Amelia, at least, felt like his behavior was rather peculiar. And at the same time. What? Feeling as if a cold finger had traced along the entirety of her back, Amelia quickly turned her gaze in the direction of the cause of that chilly feeling, the direction of Volcanica's gaze, east of the tower. East of the tower, past the end of the sea of sand, was the great waterfall at the world's edge. No, what existed there was the great waterfall, as well as a special place. That was Feeling something rough gently brushing against his face, Subaru opened his eyes whilst groaning. His vision was blurred, and after blinking a few times, a clear outline appeared, and what came into view was the cause of that rough sensation. Patrash had been licking his face with her red tongue. Is that you, Patrash? Sorry for making you worry. You risked your life again, didn't you? Sorry for always making things hard for you. Relaxing his lips, Subaru gently put his hand on his beloved Earth Dragon's worried face and began stroking it. This jet-black Earth Dragon had always saved him when he was in tough spots. Not to mention her kindness for saving him when he had amnesia, but the things Patrash had done in this past week were also of great importance. To put it simply, if Patrash hadn't been here, Rem might have died. Bringing this girl back home is probably the greatest accomplishment of Barusa's life. Even if it's true, don't diss me like that. I took Biko out and got Amelia Tan's insignia back, too. Although Roswell was involved with both of those, you know. As a matter of fact, Roswell had nothing to do with Beatrice's problem, but he dared to say it since it would get under her skin. And, as expected, he heard Ram tch with her tongue in disgust. Ram was leaning against the wall of the green room with her arms wrapped around herself. Subaru painfully narrowed his eyes and looked at her bruised body. It was clear that the battle against Libat Katos had been an intense one. Since Meili had been injured in the middle of their battle, the amount of burden Subaru could shoulder had been reduced, which was one of the reasons why she had to fight such a hard battle in the first place. Not sure of what to say, Subaru opened his mouth to apologize. Hey, Ram. It was my fault that you got hurt like this, bluff. Don't speak such stupid words. Barusu being responsible for Ram's injuries? There is no place in Ram's life where Barusu has any such role. How repulsive. What's repulsive is talking like that. Stuffing grass into a person's mouth is even worse. Subaru protested as he pulled the lump of ivy that had been shoved into his mouth, his eyes watering due to the grassy odor. Hearing that, Ram responded with an unapologetic HAA. At the argument going on between Ram and Subaru, the sound of giggling could be heard. Big brother and big sister look like such close friendes. It's like watching two siblings. Said Meili, who'd spread her legs out on the grass mattress covering the floor, the mini crimson scorpion perched on her head. Ram's face scowled at her, giggling with an easy-to-understand expression. Barusu is my little brother. For argument's sake, let's assume it's true, but even if we weren't related by blood, the Oni village would call a useless little brother like him. Is the Oni village really so severe? I'm glad I wasn't born as an Oni. That was just a joke. But, it's just that Ram could not stand the horror and would have you called. Don't make it more complicated by doubling up on your assumptions. Spit flying, Subaru shouted that at Ram, who was acting like she usually did. Having said that, he could now see that it was just her roundabout way of showing consideration for him. She'd said that the cause of her injuries was not due to his decision, after all. It was difficult for him to presume upon that consideration. But if he were stubborn and insisted that he was the one responsible, he would instead incur Ram's ire. You're such a troublesome girl, big sis. After Meili's presumptuous remark just now, kindly stop calling Ram big sis.
It would be troublesome if someone we met for the first time had a misunderstanding. Getting the usual cold reply and the Ram experience, Subaru looked around the room at everyone in the green room. There was Subaru and Patrash, and Ram and Meili along with the mini Crimson Scorpion. And at the back of the room was the sleeping beauty lying on a bed. Ram, is she not awake? I regret to say this, but I beheaded that hateful, rude person. Lady Amelia's stuff seems to have returned because of that. Julia's stuff hasn't returned, and neither has Rem's. Is there anything we're missing? Pressing his fist firmly into his palm, Subaru chewed on his bitter feelings. He had once again confirmed the matter he had spoken about to Amelia and the others about before losing consciousness. In the end, they would need to talk to those guys directly and wring the information out of them in order to completely eradicate the damage caused by gluttony. Are the ones here, based on the severity of the injuries? Where are Amelia Tan and the others? If it's Big Sister and Beatrice, they said they were going up there to meet someone. Way up on the first floor, way away up there. Who might be up there? Big Sister Ram must know, right? It's nothing to be concerned with. However, there is a large, senile old man there. The senile old man at the top of the watchtower is definitely an important key character. Hearing that there was a new character, Subaru wrinkled his eyebrows. Who was the senile old man that Ram was talking about? Or, if they were an overseer like Reed on the second floor, then it couldn't be Flugel, right? Borusu. If Flugel is the one who was up there, I'll never forgive him. I have enough to say to that guy to fill a whole mountain. If he isn't there, then Shaula. Borusu, please calm down. Calm down? Ram, you, that kind of thing. Shaula, she. The cheek of the vigorous and rash Subaru was slapped while he was trying to determine the true identity of the old man on the top floor of the tower, causing him to put strength into his knees. The cause was the palm of Ram, who had moved in on him. With his face having been slapped, Subaru widened his eyes and looked at Ram with a dumbfounded expression. Don't use Shaula as a crutch because of your own powerlessness. I heard about Shaula. She was obnoxious and unmannered, and the eyes that admired Borusu were rotten, but she wasn't so bad that she deserved to disappear. As she spoke, Ram gently placed her hand on Subaru's struck cheek. It was hot, but her palm was cold. While absorbing the heat, Ram continued her words to the speechless Subaru. If you can't accept it, then, rather than getting angry, just cry. Shaula would be happier if you cried out I miss you rather than using her as a reason for your anger. Ram is the same way. Ram. I still believe you were mixing up someone you should strongly care for with someone else. After getting one last word in, Ram flicked Subaru's forehead with her finger. That painless force made Subaru fall onto his butt, and, as he placed his hand on his forehead, said my bad. If Subaru calmed down, Flugel being on the first floor could just be called his own desire, or even something like paranoia. But for argument's sake, if Flugel really was there. Before Borusu could do anything, Lady Amelia and I would beat him until he was on the cusp of death. I can see you doing that, but not Amelia Tan. When thinking of Shaula, the amount of anger directed at Flugel was by no means small, and everyone in the tower naturally shared that feeling. With Ram's affirmation, Subaru let out a long exhale. In that case, he was curious about who the senile old man on the first floor was. Let's put that aside for now. If we assume that the senile old man can be helpful in some way, then we should ask him about the victims of the sin Archbishop of Lust, not gluttony. That's a pretty big thing to talk about, so, Ram clearly had her priorities straight at this point. Being able to advocate for such a thing without hesitation was one of Ram's fine qualities. Subaru could also resonate with her ideas to a certain extent. The prospect of being able to save the victims of lust was attractive, but did Big Sister Ram have something else in mind when you said that? However, Meili had said that right next to Subaru's face, who was on guard. She poked the mini Crimson Scorpion on her head with her finger and said, "Didn't you say this before? The effects of gluttony have something to do with time or something like that." What a loose-lipped girl. In that case, it will be necessary to discipline you properly once we return home. Oh, so scary. Meili held her head and stuck out her tiny tongue. Above her head, the mini Crimson Scorpion aimed its pincers and stinger at Ram, as if trying to protect her. However, under Ram's icy gaze, it quickly shrunk into a little ball. He could sense a part of her previous self in that flustered behavior. Ram, that hypothesis is? What's it about? It doesn't amount to much. However, it's been said that gluttony eats other people's memories, correct? If they are truly treated like food, I believe that time will affect the rate of digestion. Digestion.
Lady Amelia's came back a few hours after it was taken away. If so, then what about the other victims such as Julius the Knight, the people of Priestella, and Rem? Ah. After hearing the hypothetical statement of Ram, whose finger was raised, Subaru's eyes widened due to how uncomplicated it was. Just as she said, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony had equated the stealing of names and memories to eating. If that were more than just a superficial expression, then he could find her hypothesis to be satisfactory. It took time for the names and memories that were stolen away to be digested. Then, the reason why Amelia's name came back but nothing else did was because. There's no way, has everything already been digested? I'm not sure. There's a possibility that it might just take time for them to come back. If that's the case, then there is hope. The memories of Julius, the other victims, and Rem will hopefully come back, too. Not knowing whether it was good or bad, Ram made the above explanation. Subaru knew what she was thinking as well. This was a question that could not be answered immediately. However, now that Baton Katos had been slain and Alfred had been captured, Subaru had another big thing to worry about. No, it was something that had come up once again. Louis Arnab. He had come across her, the final gluttony, in the corridor of memories by chance, and then left her there. Was that young girl, who did not possess her own body, and took over the bodies of her two brothers as well as Subaru Natsuki's in order to commit evil deeds, really the object of a witch factor? Her abilities were not inferior to those of gluttony. However, if the life of the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony was needed to undo the damage caused by their authority, how could he defeat Louis, who was in that place? In the first place. Does the concept of dying exist in that place or not? In that place, a spirit-like body took the place of a physical one. He may be able to emulate an idea from manga and games and apply it to kill a spirit, but would that be enough to release a witch factor? Whether it was that place or Louis who remained there, nothing about them was clear. Moreover, even if an answer could be garnered. When Julius defeated Reed, Reed's role in the trial was terminated. If that's the case, then wouldn't Reed go back into his blank book of the dead? Subaru had managed to go to the place known as the Corridor of Memories within the cradle of O.D. Laguna. And the reason why he had managed to do so was because of an empty book of the dead that just happened to lead to that place. Since the soul of Reed Estrella had been used in the trial, there had been a gap in his book of the dead, which was connected to the Corridor of Memories. If that was no longer there, Subaru Natsuki may have missed the opportunity to defeat Louis Arnab. Subaru had thought a lot about it, and he needed to confirm the possibility that Reed's book of the dead was still blank. Not only that, but he also had a way to challenge his own book of the dead. This was a trump card that connected him to the Corridor of Memories. Although he would have to go through the hell of watching himself die again, it was better than closing himself off to other possibilities. He thought it would be much better for him to do so. Instead of giving up because I'd made irreversible mistakes. Such a fool. Big sis? If you have the leisure to worry about such frivolous things, then it would be much better for you to rest your mind and body so you can think properly. Barusu was not the only one who failed to choose the most excellent answer in this tower. Shaking her head, Ram gently touched her forehead. Remaining there where her horn previously came from was a slim scar. After doing so, she stretched out that same finger towards Ram, who was on the bed. She then lovingly caressed her sister's forehead and said, "For the purpose of defeating the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, I borrowed Rem's power. Though I achieved victory in the end, it came at a cost. This girl must have paid a heavy burden, right? Heavy burden. If it were Barusu, and I did the thing where I activated my horn, Barusu's body would probably explode from the inside out." Subaru, who had taken on Ram's usual burdens before, knew very well that these were not exaggerated words. The simple acts of breathing and moving conservatively made Ram experience the taste of hell. That kind of her was the real deal. What sort of recoil would he get from it? It would be no exaggeration to say that had Subaru taken it on, a part of his body would suffer from so much damage that it would never be able to recover. After Ram told him that she made Rem take on her burdens, she closed her eyes, revealing her long eyelashes. However, she said, "Makes sense," and then continued. "Because of this, Rem might feel resentment towards me when she wakes up. However, I will not regret it. Ram is Rem's sister. That fact will never change, even if this girl resents or hates Ram. Then, so that things might get better, we can only rely on each other. Rem won't hate you. Yes, I'm sure you're right. She's a very smart girl, and my amazing little sister." Like this, Ram smiled, brimming with confidence, and looked at Subaru with her pale crimson eyes. Though she had no memories of her little sister except through Subaru, since she came to love her, she no longer doubted her feelings. Instead of lamenting about the past, it was better to forge a better future. Saying these words to me really hits me where it hurts, you know.
Unbeknownst to Ram, Subaru had gone through several loops to change the past. For Ram, who was an extremely positive thinker, it wouldn't be too much to describe Subaru's using of return by death as being an extremely regressive form of thinking. Return by death, which changed what had already occurred, was always used because of regretting the past.
In the end, it's better not to use it, huh?
Subaru once again loosened his tightly clenched fist, smiling bitterly. He admitted that he used return by death in order to seize a better future where everyone could laugh together. Based on that, he also knew he should not indulge himself too much in the use of return by death itself. In this tower, Subaru had seen the shedding of so many tears and heard many voices full of regret.
Although I'm not Suri, but Big Brother looks to be a bit better. Seeing the change in Subaru's expression, Meili whispered that while sitting on the floor.
She was sitting in a PE sitting posture and, while stroking her 3-strand braid, said, "Big sister, Emilia, and big sister Ram can do it, but I'd be in trouble if you felt down since I can't cheer you up, so please don't feel down.
You promised me you'd show me how much I could depend on you to get things done, right?"
"Oh, there was that promise as well."
Well, I'll definitely keep it, this time."
Gazing at Meili and the mini crimson scorpion on her head, Subaru nodded his head vigorously. To the side, Patrash nuzzled her head against his cheek, as if supporting his determination. Though her scaly body was tough, since he had gotten used to it, he could rub his cheeks against it without feeling uncomfortable.
Subaru returned that show of affection with affection of his own and then stood up.
Although he had consumed so much energy before that he collapsed earlier, he seemed to have more or less recovered his lost strength. The spirit of the green room had a variety of healing methods at its disposal. If I think about it, whether it began who joined the big battle or the spirit in this room, I don't know how to thank them enough for everything they've done. Shaula had explained that although the green room was used as a recovery room, there was a spirit here originally that was fond of treating the injuries of those who entered the room. It did not have a physical form, nor was it possible to converse with the spirit, but its intention for healing others was crystal clear. Subaru and the others had been healed time after time by this room as they constantly attempted to capture the tower. It was for that reason that, after arriving at the watchtower, Rem had been left in this room.
Well, I didn't let her stay here just cause I wanted her to hang around. The spirit, then. Barusu, no, it'd be a waste to say it. Why don't we force it to come out by using Julius' divine protection of gathering spirits?
I know what you're trying to say, but it won't work on me since my strong point is that I can put my life on the line for Biko.
Anyways, I wonder if we can talk to it with the added effect of Julius' divine protection. The divine protection of gathering spirits was simply a divine protection that made it easier for him to be liked by spirits.
Under that effect, he had contracted with his 6 quasi-spirits, No, La and the others who'd been elevated into spirits. If he could use that effect to converse with the spirit of the green room, it would open up a world of possibilities. The spirit has been in the tower for as long as Shaula, if not longer. That nameless being might be able to help solve the mysteries in the watchtower. While Subaru was immersed in his thoughts, a small breath suddenly flowed into the room.
Ram? What's the matter? I sense something strange. This is... Ram uttered an unusual premonition in that moment. Hick. Ha!
A phenomenon suddenly occurred in the middle of the green room, light spilled out, shocking Subaru and the others. In response to that, their bodies suddenly stiffened, and Subaru and Ram gravitated over to where Ram was. Meili and Patrash also seemed to be wary of it and slowly moved away from the light.
What's happening? I don't know. In any case, do not leave us. No matter what happens. Oh,
Subaru shielded the flurried Meili behind him, his warning words having been interrupted. The reason was because the light in the room suddenly became brighter, which captured his attention. Then, while covering his eyes with his hands, he carefully gazed in the direction of the light. He could see that the light, which was currently strong, was gradually becoming weaker, and then it disappeared. When he wasn't sure whether or not he should be relieved or cautious, that appeared in front of Subaru's eyes.
Ha!
Subaru wasn't sure what it meant when that appeared right in front of his eyes in the spot where the light disappeared. He became speechless, then stunned, and then speechless once more.
A girl?
Next to Subaru, seeing the same thing as him, was Ram, who'd muttered that in surprise.
That observation was correct.
However, between him and her, she did not have the same knowledge of the girl that Subaru did.
Subaru knew the name of that girl.
The name of the girl lying on the floor of the green room was
Louis Arnab.
Louis Arnab, the girl who appeared in the middle of the room along with the light.
was speechless when the youngest sister of the Sin Archbishops of Gluttony trio known as Satiation and was not supposed to have a physical form appeared in reality like that. However, the nearby Ram did not fail to pick up on his words. Louis Arneb, the name of the last gluttony, isn't it? Subaru had yet to tell Ram the details about his encounter with Louis through the Book of the Dead during this loop. He'd only mentioned that he'd had contact with her. Ram had a very good memory indeed. Now faced with this question, Subaru was a bit disturbed. That's right. She's the last one of the gluttonies, Louis Arneb. The little sister of Batten Catos and Alfred. It appears that she is unconscious. Based on what Ram had said, Subaru calmly observed Louis and determined that she was indeed asleep. Well, he could say that, but he wasn't exactly sure if that was the case. How in the world could Louis, who didn't even have a physical body, appear here like this? He could not imagine that she, who was ever so terrified of and despaired because of Subaru's return by death ability, would somehow reinvigorate herself within a few hours and come back to challenge him again. The thing known as death was something that left a deep wound in a person's heart. I can't make any progress even after thinking about it. Meili. Go get Amelia Tan and the others. Ram and I will watch her. Really, you're such a slave driver. Don't let yourself die easily, Kay? Gradually moving backwards, Meili moved towards the entrance of the green room. Subaru heard her admonishments and gave her a thumbs up before she left. He saw the mini crimson scorpion above her head put up its pincers as if imitating her, before she quickly turned around and went to go get Amelia and the others. And then, in the room where Subaru and Ram remained. I don't think anything will happen, but in any case, should we tie her up with ivy? I'd rather not provoke them, Barusu, have you noticed it yet? What? When he was trying to discuss the treatment of Louis with her, Ram grabbed his shoulder and asked him that. Not seeming to understand the purpose of her question, he cocked his head. So, Ram pointed at the ceiling of the green room with her chin. No, the entire room. The healing effects of the room have disappeared. The spirit is gone. Ah. That's a joke, right? It's not a joke. Barusu, even you will be able to feel it if you concentrate. There is an emptiness in this place. Subaru looked around the room, spurred on by Ram's statement. Even if he was told to concentrate, the way Subaru felt the presence of a spirit was by picking them up, kissing their face, sleeping together, and so on. He's not sure about other ways of doing it. However, just as Ram had said, he could no longer feel the gentle power that had previously wrapped around his entire body. It seemed that something had indeed happened, for the spirit in the green room was no longer there. If that is so, then perhaps it has something to do with the Sin Archbishop. Subaru could not deny Ram's conjecture. He also had a similar thought. The spirit in the green room had disappeared and been replaced by Louis Arneb. Then, perhaps. Anyways, it's best not to jump to any conclusions. We should wait for Lady Amelia and Lady Beatrice to return. Once Lady Amelia and the others come back, we can continue our discussion on what to do with Louis. He thought that was what Ram was about to say. However, she did not continue her words. One step ahead of her, the blackness that led to the demise of all had assaulted the Pleiades watchtower. Hick! A huge explosion went off at their feet, letting off a bang, causing Subaru and the others to get thrown into the air. Seconds afterwards, his entire body crashed into the ceiling and wall, making him let out a "Guh." He then turned his head to figure out what had happened. Fear permeated throughout his whole body as that vile presence drew near. And no way. In a state of disbelief, Subaru stood up, denying that foreboding feeling in his gut. But that horrible chill grew stronger and stronger, making his suspicions more and more real. Patrash! Take Ram! Re-e! As he crawled along the floor, he grabbed Ram's body and threw her over to Patrash. Though she was still covered in injuries, Patrash understood his intentions and flew towards the room's entrance. Barusu, that fool! Ram resented that forceful action, but there was no time to listen to her. Subaru pushed off of the ground and sped towards Ram on the bed made of ivy. Then he carried her towards the door. Just before that, the figure of Louis, who was tumbling in the grass, passed by the edge of his vision. Hick! Ah, shit! She-ite! While spewing out curses angrily, Subaru exerted as much strength as possible with his worn-out body for this maneuver. With Rem's body held in the right hand, he used his left hand to grab Louis's arm by force. Both of them were rather light. In extraordinary circumstances like this, it was possible for him to ignore the weight as he carried them. Like this, carrying both of them, he was on the verge of leaping out of the green room. A
black shadow emerged through the floor of the green room, as if trying to cut Subaru off from the entrance. Indeed, it was the black shadow. The last of the 5 obstacles, the black shadow of the witch who had an obsession with Subaru, had come to the tower at a time like this. Ram! Subaru, who was screaming maniacally, tried to get Rem away from the clutches of the shadow. However, the black shadow swallowed up his vision, leaving not even a gap. Moreover, the black shadow did not stop flowing in, engulfing him from the front, the left, the right, and the back. Damn it! Even though I've made it this far. Gazing at the shadow inching closer and closer, Subaru's heart was filled with regret as he tried to find a way to escape. If he got swallowed up by the black shadow, he would lose his life and have to return by death. If he returned by death in this tower, and his respawn point had not been updated, then he would have to start over at a point when Lewis was still within him. If that happened, he would be at the mercy of the Sin Archbishop in the shape of a white girl. That fear was what drove him to do his best, with the attitude that this loop was his last chance. Orusu! Snap out of it! Rem would cry. Re. Coming from beyond the black shadow were the desperate cries of Ram and Patrash. In response, Subaru took a deep breath, but could not utter a word. Long before that, the entirety of Subaru Natsuki had been swallowed up by the black shadow. Having been swallowed up by the immense black shadow, Subaru's consciousness slowly swirled around in the darkness. He felt as if his hands, feet, blood, flesh, and his very existence had been broken apart and turned into concepts. Consumed by endlessly powerful and vast emotions, his very existence had been overwritten. I love you. He heard a murmur in that silent and dark nothingness. That sound was, indeed, very nostalgic for him, causing Subaru Natsuki's consciousness to smile to itself. Getting used to someone saying I love you to him was akin to being the knight who was loved by his 6 spirits. Unfortunately, Subaru didn't have a strong will like that. Even if he pushed himself to his limits, the love he could give was limited to what he could do with his own 2 hands and back. So, the whispers of the black shadow just seemed like forced words to him. So? It's way too forced, you know? I love you. 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 Sorry, can't give you an answer to that. That phrase is like a landmine to me right now. I've never been able to grab the hand of the person who said that to me. I love you. 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 Is there no way for us to hear each other? Then, hurry up and consume me. In this nothingness, there was no hope of escaping from it and living. So, Subaru Natsuki would die a merciless death in the darkness. He would not grieve over it, but would accept it and turn that feeling into anger, pushing himself onwards. When I get back, the worst thing may be waiting for me. Lewis, who would still have a clear head on her shoulders, might fight me again for my return by death ability. I love you. 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 But I'm not gonna lose. I won't lose. No matter how many times it takes, I'll keep fighting. This time, I'll keep my promise. I love you. 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 I'll fight for tomorrow's tomorrow, no matter how many times it takes. He would no longer be overwhelmed by the repetitive I love yous. He was sorry, but the heart that could be wounded by such words had gotten worn out long ago. This kind of love could not chain Subaru Natsuki down any longer. And yet the words of love that were continuously uttered did not pay any mind to Subaru's rejection. Indeed, the words of love themselves came pouring in, coating the world in them as Subaru Natsuki was swallowed up by the darkness. I love you. 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 I love you.
I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I am Volcanica. In accordance with the ancient covenant, the will of thee who hath reached the top shall be questioned. In the next instant, a pale blue light poured down from above, striking the darkness that had engulfed the world. That fierce light then swallowed up the darkness, and the color of the world changed. It changed. It shone, Ged. Mm. Subaru groaned as he felt a rough sensation moving against his face and opened his eyes. His consciousness slowly returned. And at the same time, on the other side of his open eyelids, his blurry vision gradually returned to normality, revealing an outline. Subaru had continued to feel a rough sensation on his cheek during this time. Pat, Rask. I got it. I'm up. I'm awake, already. He wasn't sure just how tired he was, the sound coming from his throat was incredibly thin, and he wasn't sure if his intentions were being communicated properly. The other person didn't show any signs of stopping their skinship. You're being such a sweetie. I bet you could win the next heroin contest with that cuteness. Ayah-oo? Ayah-ah-oo. After swallowing some saliva in his dry mouth, he managed to utter a word and got a response in return. However, the answer Subaru received was different from what he was expecting, causing his face to stiffen. His cheek was being licked like mad, and, gradually getting his vision back, what appeared in front of him was Woo-ah. Louis Arnab, while sitting on top of Subaru, was licking his face. You-wah. Wah. Subaru was startled by that impossible sight and then immediately pushed Louis, who'd been in front of him, away. Due to that action, she let out an anguished cry and rolled around on the grass. Gazing at that sight, Subaru desperately slid his butt backwards. What the hell are you doing? What are you trying to do? Coming on to me like this. Woo. Wah. Wah, what in the? What the hell? Did I die? Subaru stared at Louis in complete shock, his voice trembling with desperation. Right in front of Subaru was Louis, lying on her back in the grass, shaking her arms and legs like a child, whining. He didn't understand what she was doing. What was the point? No, before that. Where is this place? Without taking his eyes off Louis, Subaru observed his surroundings whilst staying vigilant. Then, what came into his view was a lush, green prairie, as if it were a vast grassland, flowers swayed in the wind here and there. Such a sight would be impossible to see in the Agria sand dunes. Well, to be precise, there were also things like flower gardens there where courtesan bears lived, but this was not an artificial place, and the vegetation was definitely real. A little bit further away, Subaru could see a forest, plunging his mind into confusion. This clearly was not the Agria sand dunes. It didn't seem to be the corridor of memories where he'd encountered Louis before either. The grass seems pretty real. And it tastes like grass. After pulling up some grass and checking the smell and taste of it, Subaru was certain that it was real. Then, basing it on the injuries he'd incurred and the state of his torn clothing, he confirmed that the traces from the last battle, the battle surrounding the Pleiades watchtower, had remained. That is to say, that the battle had taken place, and Subaru had yet to die. He had been swallowed by the massive black shadow that had assaulted the green room and survived. That's right. Rem is. If Louis was right here in front of him, that meant that Rem, who he also had in his grasp at that time, would also be around here. Based on that idea, Subaru ignored Louis and searched around the grassland for Rem. It did not take long for him to find her soundless figure lying down in the low-cut grass. Rem. Ah, this is great. What a relief, you're safe and sound. Rushing over to Rem, Subaru confirmed that she was indeed safe and then fell to the ground in relief. She also appeared to not have any external injuries. Her body temperature and slow breathing were just as they were before. This made Subaru breathe a sigh of relief and wipe away the sweat on his brow. Ah, there's nothing to worry about. Big Sis would kill me if anything happened to Rem, anyways. Even if Ram didn't do anything, Subaru would go ahead and off himself since he wouldn't be able to forgive himself. While having such thoughts, Subaru uttered then again. And then looked up. Where is this place? Where's the tower at? Where are Emilia Tan, Biko, and the others? Looking around, he still could not find the watchtower that was supposed to be visible in the distance. No matter where he looked, the result was the same. Emilia. Biko. Ram. Oh, what?
Even if he couldn't see them, there was a possibility that they would respond, so Subaru called out to Amelia and the others. However, his voice begat hollowness, and the only one who answered was Louis, lying in the grass. Although that fact annoyed him, it was also true that he could not ignore her presence. With no way of knowing what she was trying to do, nor with a way to deal with whatever it might be, the only one who could protect Rem was himself, so he got up so he could deal with Louis and. When he was about to get on his feet, someone gently grabbed onto his arm. Subaru, currently on one knee and about to stand up, emitted a gruff breath. Though the strength of the arm pulling on his sleeve was not much, he could not move an inch. Subaru's knees began to creak and tremble, and his whole body began to sweat. It truly was an incomprehensible urge. The entire being known as Subaru Natsuki began to shake all at once, the phenomenon making him go crazy. That was a shock that could not be described in words. That was intense emotions that could not be compared to anything else. That was, of all the great surprises he had savored in this world, it was as big as a massive wave. Slowly, her eyelids trembled and opened slightly. Beneath those eyelids were her pale blue eyes, as clear as the surface of a lake. He loved her happy and cheerful eyes. He loved the twinkle in her eyes when she occasionally acted mischievously. He loved the eyes that grasped his heart when she pleaded with him. He had always yearned for that radiance. His heart thumping, his throat quivering, as if he were choking on something, unable to produce a sound. He'd choked up. That was indeed so. How many thoughts were swirling around in his heart at this moment? The words he'd wanted to convey to her, the things he'd wanted to talk to her about, the dreams he'd wanted to share with her, all of these had been accumulating. In pursuit of these very things, Subaru Natsuki. Rem. His lips trembling, he called out her name. Sadly, he had failed countless times trying to do just that. He wondered if he had ever clearly conveyed anything to her. Perhaps it had only been done in his own fantasies, and the most important thing was never conveyed. Out of fear, Subaru gasped out her name repeatedly. Rem, Rem. Rem, Rem. Rem. Each time he called out her name, he could not stop his tears from overflowing like a flood. Each time tears flowed out of his eyes, she became blurred. Whenever she became obscured, he was afraid she would slip through his fingers once more. And so, with snot falling out like rain and desperately wiping his face with his sleeve, Subaru frantically tried to keep her face in his view. Rem blinked silently, a light shining in her eyes. Having gotten to this point, Subaru knew this was not simply an illusion being shown due to his desire. He had no doubt that this was her Rem and she was here. Rem appeared to be trying to say something, her lips moving weakly. Hearing only that weak sound, Subaru's heart was on the brink of breaking. He'd always talked to her sleeping face and, in order to confirm that she still had life, checked her breathing as she slept. Ushering in countless mornings and nights, Subaru had vowed to get her back. However, not once had he heard her voice in all this time. Closing his eyes, he recalled how she'd call out his name, and all sorts of other scenes. But all of that belonged to the past. Today, tomorrow, he wanted to hear the voice of the new her. Now that wish had finally come true. Subaru had gotten what he'd yearned for. It's fine. It's okay, so take your time. Who? She anxiously moved her lips, her mouth still closed. Honestly, he thought he should grab her a glass of water or something for her now. However, there didn't seem to be a water source available near them, and it was impossible for him to tear his eyes away from her. Just a single word. If she called out to Subaru once more. When he heard that word, he would. Rem. In silence, Rem sped up the movements of her lips, seeking out any ounce of moisture in her mouth. Moistening her tongue with the secreted saliva, Rem finally regained enough strength to open her mouth. Then, with Subaru reflected in her light blue eyes, she opened her mouth and said, "Who are you?" The sound that spun from her lips, tied together with significance, pierced into Subaru's mind. Who are you? Subaru knelt down, gazing at Rem's expression, holding his breath. Then, painfully exhaling the accumulated breath in his lungs, he pounded on his chest. Harder and harder, twice, thrice, talking to himself. He should have expected this possibility. The possibility that Rem might not remember him when she woke up, he had considered it. It was only natural to think of that if he took Gluttony's authority into account. There was a high possibility of her waking up without her name or memories. Indeed, it was quite likely. So, it wasn't like Subaru had never considered that she'd lack memories. And, of course, the shock and pain he was feeling right now wouldn't be eliminated just because of this either. Even if that were the case, no longer would Subaru curse fate and live in despair, no longer would he live in rage, no longer would he pretend to be a tragic hero and feel sorry for himself. Most important of all, Subaru Natsuki had already been told something by her. Please show me how awesome you can be, Subaru.
My name is Subaru Natsuki.
Gritting his teeth hard, Subaru threw away his anguished expression and pulled his cheeks up. Rubbing his face hard, he did his best to put on an act and give Rem a smile.
You may not be able to remember it for now. But,
You are. In the face of Rem's question, Subaru made a pause and shut his eyes tightly. Then, his black eyes reflecting in her light blue eyes, he continued.
I'm your hero. I've missed you, Rem.
Saying this, for the sake of the girl he'd made an oath to, Subaru Natsuki once again took on the role of a hero. Bearing the image of a broken hero, the young boy once again gave his name for the sake of the young girl. Once again, here and now, he vowed to start a story with her, from zero. End of Arc 6, The Corridor of Memories.